This week we're going to talk about the air in airgun, literally, and how we get it in there. Be warned, it's a big one today in more ways than one. Hello and welcome to AAR on Air. We shoot them and they all need it. But how do we put the air in air guns? Today I'll be looking at the options and focusing on the different types of compressors that have started entering the marketplace and at lower and lower prices. Perhaps it's time to consider one. I will be going through a lot of detail, but this is not a full and total review of each of them, more the main important points. When I first started with airguns, Shakespeare was still just a lad and Springers were pretty much the only option. Then, not content with single-shot rifles, people wanted more options. Multi-shot, recoilless, whisper quiet, big shot counts and higher calibers with greater speed and power. The PCP became more popular and of course they needed feeding with more and more air, and when you have the option to shoot more rounds and faster, the beast grows, so to speak. Then came high capacity magazines, larger air cylinders, which then created the next problem: how to get all that air into guns. Initially it was grunt and sweat. Lots of both, in fact, using one of these. They do work, but if you've used one, you will know it leaves you somewhat warm and in need of air yourself. And if you pick up the gun immediately afterwards, the chances of hitting anything are greatly reduced, as by now your heart rate is higher than a teenager's in a Miss World dressing room. So you can always go off and have a cup of tea before you pick up the gun again, or simply fill it after you've done shooting, provided it has enough air in it for your next round of target work. Of course, if you shoot a lot, you won't need that gym membership unless you're my age. Then you're going to need a nurse. But thinking about that is doing nothing for my heart rate. So along comes the air tank or diver's tank. These are available in all different sizes, from smaller ones, say 3 litres, up to bigger ones at 12 litres. But be warned, the bigger they are, the heavier they are. Granted, you will get more fills, but probably finish up with a hernia as well. Bless him, my mate Jars has his tank on an old golf trolley, and he's a big bloke. Not a bad idea though. Of course, ultimately you're going to need to get these filled up as well. How often depends on the size of the tank, how often you shoot, and if you're shooting FAC guns, which are even more air hungry. The huge Daystate Wolverine 303 only gets a useful 12 shots from its large 300cc cylinder. One answer is to spend about a £5 a go and get it filled up at your local diver's shop. Well, my local was 20 miles away, so every week it was costing me not only the £5 but fuel and time too. Enter the personal compressor. Today there are loads of options, which include ones to fill your diver's tanks to ones more suited to filling your gun. Some will even do both. Some will even let you use them out in the field, quite literally. So the next problem you have is which one is right for you. Let's take a look at some popular versions. Firstly, let's look at the most expensive of the 5 I have with me, and I'm going to start by looking at the advertising blurb that goes with it. I'm sure you've seen this advert in the Airgun mags recently. It is the £2,275 UK retail priced Daystate. The advert states, any place, anywhere. Well, I'm here in the workshop to put that to the test. You see, to me, that implies that this is transportable. And I suppose it is if you're built like Arnold Schwarzenegger or you have one of these. You see, this thing is a beast. It weighs about as much as a small planet. And I wouldn't exactly say it was particularly portable. It also needs 240 volts mains. So I suppose it is any place, anywhere, there's a main socket. The alternative, of course, is you could use one of these. Of course, if you've got both of these running, any rabbit, quarry or anything within a mile radius has already gone to ground. The other issue, of course, is by the time you've got this lot in your car, you haven't got any room for any guns anymore. But I'll come back to this one. So, in the meantime, what other options have we got? Well, I do have the K30, Artemis K30 to be precise, and it's on loan from the nice guys at SMK, who also gave us the EC300 to try. Not content with that, we got hold of the Venturi Nomad 2. Then I thought, what about a wild card? Enter the eBay Special. Now it must be said that the guys at Hills, which is an English company, who also make compressors, wanted to get involved, but sadly we couldn't get hold of any at the time of putting this together. So 5 compressors, to me we've got the makings of a comparison. So back to the studio. With a lot to get through, I'm going to split these up into tank fill capable and gun fill ones. Naturally you'll be able to fill direct to guns with all of them, but some are more tailored to tanks. The tests are to top up a 4-litre tank from 200 to 300 bar and to top up a 300cc gun cylinder from 100 to 250 bar. Firstly, the Daystate Compressor, which is actually mine. I bought it when there were fewer options out there at the time. I must let you know that it is made by Coltre in Italy and rebadged as Daystate. This one actually disintegrated internally after 2 hours use, but it's back here after a long period of time, a lot of help from Drapers and finally a little help from Daystate too. Let's take a closer look at this now working heavy hitter. Let's look at the stats. Full details are on the screen, but I won't bore you by reading them out. You can always pause it if you want to read through all the info. There will be some in-use footage too. The main detail is of course the weight at 46 kilograms or 101.5 pounds. It's not what you would call transportable, mainly aimed at tank filling, but can be used for direct to gun if you buy the adapter. But be warned, it won't take long to top your gun up, so keep an eye on it. It is only 240 volts, so no 12 volt out in the field. And ideally, at a 16 amp hungry startup, it is best suited to its own electric ring. Best not use it on the same socket as the missus blow drying her hair. It is quite noisy in use, but read only 83.5 decibels on the meter. As you would expect, it was the fastest to fill the 4-litre diver's tank and of course is the most expensive. Realistically, this is for someone who shoots a lot, or probably better suited to a club. Naturally, you can change the cut-off pressure to suit your needs. This one has carbon filters, which will even allow it to be used for breathing air. And it is the only one here capable of doing that. The best practice around this is to drain it off every 15 to 20 minutes of use if you're filling large tanks. I've also got a late entry to the compressor comparison review. It's the bigger Venturi. A few specs first. It's not as heavy or as large as the Daystate, but still not small or light. This one is aimed at tank fill or gun fill and has a bit of a hybrid water cooling system. It is important to point out that this one does need quite a lot of setting up, and again would benefit from a decent dealer who is capable and prepared to set this up for you. It needs dismantling all the outer panels to be able to fill this up with oil and water. It does require a specific oil, and this is not supplied in the box, and they also suggest distilled water in the cooling system. This particular one has a big, bold and sensible label on the top informing you to follow the instructions in the manual before use. And this is very important because of the suggested run-in time, etc. But surprisingly, there was no manual supplied in the box. And the only place I could find this was online using a bit of a back door on Pyramid Air's website. This was fed back and a paper copy was forwarded the next day from the supplier. There is a small box supplied in the main box containing important breather for the oil filler port, a tool, spare O-rings, spare filter, and worryingly a whole host of head gaskets. I say worryingly, maybe it's refreshing to find a company who covers all bases, but I can't help wondering if they are in there because they feel they're going to need changing at some point. If you're going to use this for filling your tank, you will need an adapter to be able to do it. And as I've said, this is water cooled and has a reserve tank that contains what looks like a small aquarium pump. This is then pumped around the heads to cool them and returns to the tank after going through a small radiator with a fan to cool it. It's quite a nice all-in-one contained system and idea. There is also a battery-powered temperature gauge to be able to ensure this does not overheat. It is 240 volt only, and due to its weight, it's more aimed at a club or someone who shoots a lot, or maybe a consortium to share that £1,600 UK retail price tag. Next one up is the EC300 from SMK. Here are the stats. Smaller and more manageable than the Daystate, yet still has a heavier industrial feel to it. Still quite heavy at 21.1 kilograms or 46.5 pounds. A lot easier to fill direct to gun with this, but still capable of filling a tank if preferred. It does take considerably more time than the Daystate at 18 minutes 43 seconds. Like the Daystate, this has hours of use indicator on the top, which will help you keep track to keep it serviced at the right times. It's not cheap at £1,400 UK, but well made, solid construction with a nice oil-filled gauge. It is set at 300 bar and is not a simple task to change that, unlike the rest of them. So if you're going to be using it to charge direct to guns or different maximum pressures, please be careful. The main selling point of this is its quiet use at only 74.3 decibels, which is far more acceptable sound level if you don't want to disturb anyone. It is the kind of hum that would send the kids to sleep. Like all of these compressors, other than the Daystate, it's made in China. And you can even hear yourself Next is the wild card. This one I bought myself specifically for the test. It was from Amazon, but can be bought from eBay just the same. So I'm going to refer to this as the eBay special. £169 and it was delivered within the week. It is up to 300 bar maximum pressure, but there is a 400 bar one available for similar money. You will need to rearrange the hose connections, and out of the box the temperature gauge didn't work. It will need filling with some good quality oil, which wasn't supplied. It does, however, come supplied with a small aquarium pump for the external cooling system. And all the plugs, by the way, are non-UK and need adapters. One was supplied, but there are two that are actually needed to make this thing work fully. Let's look at the stats then. It's smaller and lighter than the previous two and looks more old-fashioned with its sticky out bits and pipes. It was faster than the EC300 at filling the tank, doing it in just 10 minutes and 9 seconds. And a truly amazing 1 minute 27 seconds for the gun fill test. It is only 240 volts, so it's no good for out in the field. It's a little on the noisy side, but quite livable. It has that quirky water cooling system, but it does seem to work pretty well. It is time consuming to connect all the plastic pipes, which actually came quite kinked out of the box. So you need to connect these plastic pipes up, which are a little thin and, as I said, kinked, and put them onto the aquarium pump into a bucket of cold water. Then watch it trickle up, through and out of the machine, returning back into the bucket, feeling warmer, but not hot. Simple water-cool system with the added benefit of warm water to go and wash the car with afterwards. The gauge is also the pressure setting device, which works perfectly well, unlike the temperature gauge, which was completely blank, so I thought I would take this apart to see if a wire had come loose or something. Well, no wires at all. This is battery powered and permanently on, of course draining the batteries. And the sensor is just laying under the cover. Not an amazing design, really. Longevity. Well, I can't tell you really, other than to say that so far this has lasted longer than the £2,000 plus Daystate did. But I feel that was probably a Friday afternoon build, if you know what I mean. Because it's mine, I'm more than happy to keep you up to date with its progress if you're interested. Sadly, there is no hours of use indicator, so it's a little bit of guesswork really. First of our 12 volt 240 volt items is a rather nicely finished Venturi Nomad 2. This one is basically a 12 volt compressor with a built-in transformer, which needs checking that it is set to 240 volts when you first get it. Once set, you can run it from mains or a running car battery. Do make sure that the engine is running on the vehicle before you try and switch this on. All the required cables are supplied in the box together with feet extensions, filters, spares and fittings. The specs then. I wouldn't use this for filling air tanks. It would take far too long and it isn't designed for it. It is pretty lightweight and portable at just over 8 kilograms and not particularly loud. It requires no initial oil filling but does need to be fed a couple of drops of silicone oil in the required port from time to time. which, by the way, isn't supplied in the box. There is no time use gauge either, and the pressure gauge is the same unit as on the K30 and the eBay Special, and it controls the pressure cutoff switch. It's easy and efficient to use. There is a load indicator that needs to be kept below 30. It even has a disco light on the bottom that flashes when in use. Thankfully, there is a switch to switch this off. Like most of these, it comes with an inline filter. And this should always be used and checked because, as you can see, it does prevent particles going into your tank or gun. There is a correct run procedure with this. Plug it into the mains and the first fan starts. Then press the power reset button and a second fan starts. Set the gauge and connect to the gun. Then press the on-off button and watch until it's full. It will automatically shut off though when it is full. Bleed off the excess air before removing the hose from the gun. With the Nomad, there is a second bleed valve on the underside. And this should be opened about every 20 goes. Finally, we have the K30 from SMK, which is another Take It Anywhere compressor, and this is the smallest one here. It comes in two parts. The main body is simply a 12-volt high-pressure compressor, and it feels so very much like the Nomad in parts and construction, sharing the same gauge and switchgear and even the same operational action. The subtle difference is the separate non-built-in transformer, which converts it to be able to use from a 240 volt supply. Like all the others, it comes with all cables required. But the transformer to compressor cable is only 12 inches or 30 centimeters long, so you will need to keep it pretty close to each other. The stats then. It is the lightest here at 6.3 kilograms or 14 pounds, but you'll need to add the 1.13 kilograms of the separate transformer for the overall weight. It is the loudest here according to the decibel meter, but still quite acceptable and seems quieter than is indicated. Strangely enough, there is no oil required in this at all, not even the odd drop of silicone oil, as with the Nomad. I wouldn't try to fill a tank with this, but it is ideally suited to top up your guns and took a little under 8 minutes in the test. It uses a twin fan system, just like the Nomad, and currently retails at a lower £500 UK all in. Now, before the conclusion, just a few words around using tanks and compressors. You are dealing with very high pressure systems and should be treated with care. Air tanks should go through a hydrostatic pressure test every 5 years. And if you're diving with them, this is a 1-year visual inspection and a 2.5-year test, I believe. Don't be tempted to buy a compressor just to fill an old, out-of-date tank that has been lying around rusting in your mate's shed for the past decade. Compressors should be serviced regularly for safety and longevity. And please, use a little common sense. If they are hot and you have been running them a long time, give them chance to cool down. As a guide, 15 to 20 minutes run time in one go is more than enough for most of these compressors to handle. All of these compressors that have been reviewed, barring the K30, will need an initial bit of tinkering and setup to start with. Now, if you buy it from a reputable dealer, they should do this before it leaves the shop for you. When filling from compressors, equalise the pressures before you open the valves on your tanks. Is also a very good practice. Direct to gun, the gun should do this for you. Conclusion. I see a couple of things that would determine which you would buy. Cost has to play a big part in any decision, but normally the more you spend, the more reliable it would be. In this case, that hasn't necessarily proven to be right, but it could simply be I got the Friday afternoon one. Who knows? The other factor has to be personal requirements. If you want to fill tanks, which will make each gun fill quicker at the time of shooting, or if you're happy to fill direct to gun each time you need a top-up, then I suppose it's down to speed. How quickly do you want these to fill for you? Each of these has their own place. The Daystate is suited more to clubs than an occasional shooter and is the fastest but the most expensive by far. And with a market opening up to more and more compressors, unless you really need the fastest, there are more options. The bigger Venturi Comp 4500 to my mind fits between the Daystate and the EC300 and would suit a club or consortium or maybe an individual who shoots a lot. It incidentally also fits between the two with its £1,600 price tag. If noise is an issue but you don't need the fastest filler, then the quality feel of the EC300 from SMK may well suit your needs if you have a spare £1,400 lying around. Again, you're going to need to be a frequent shooter or maybe buy it between a few of you. If true portability is what you're looking for, and a more direct-to-gun rather than tank filling, then either the Nomad 2 or the K30 will fit the bill. It's a lot less money, smaller, lighter and more compact. And if you're going to be using 12 volt mostly, then the smaller of the two, the SMK K30, would be probably the lighter option, because that needs the separate transformer if you're going to go 240 volts, which is a little messy, but it's not the end of the world. The Nomad 2, however, has the whole lot complete in one unit and will be better for you if that's what you prefer. Finally, if you're on a budget and happy to risk the quality and reliability, considering there is a supposed 12-month warranty on it, the fiddly water-cooled eBay special may tick the right boxes. Who knows? If it was just a quick gun top-up you need, you may get away without setting up the water cooling system, provided your batteries in the temperature gauge are working. It's been a long one this time. I hope you found something in it for you. I would like to say thanks to Karl at Drapers for the time spent sourcing these compressors and resurrecting my Daystate. And of course, thank you for watching.